Hi, I'm Dr. Daniel Berger. Welcome back to AIM Truthcast. Today we're going to be exploring specifically impulsivity and hyperactivity included in the ADHD construct. So let's slightly switch gears and look at this idea of prudence, the opposite of impulsivity and hyperactivity. It is the opposite of what secularists call executive control or executive function. Again, they theorize that normal children have self-control, but somehow ADHD children lack the ability to have self-control. I can tell you right now that is the farthest thing from the truth. It is a theoretical issue. I don't want to say exception to that is that when all children, not just those that are labeled or categorized into the psychiatric taxonomy, when all children are not getting sleep, when all people, even adults, aren't getting proper sleep, quality, quantity, and regularity, we should expect that our cognitive abilities, our memory, and our executive function, the ability to have motor control, not to be stumbling everywhere and fumbling through our words and not being able to think clearly, is going to be diminished. And as I've noted, the vast majority of kids that are diagnosed as ADHD, that are classified as having ADHD is a better way to accurately say it, don't sleep well. And so that is something to consider if you want to buy into this executive function or executive control idea that they have theorized about. Again, is complete conjecture. And I know people will be upset at that. There really is no science to it. I've studied it out. They correlate brain areas. They also, by the way, say that we in our Christian faith have brain dysfunction. They have tried to say there's aspects of the brain. I just saw a new article in Neuroscience News trying to say that all faith, including the Christian faith, is just simply a hallucination that occurs in the brain. And I want to make that very clear to you. They are just theorizing about this because they have no other way to approach a child's behavior if they don't accept morality. If they don't accept God's wisdom, they have to create their own system to deal with this. So let's look carefully at the biblical concept of prudence. The first verses I want us to see are in Proverbs chapter 1, verses 1 through 8. This is the prologue to the book of Proverbs. It basically summarizes and sets up the core of the book of Proverbs. In my book, Discipling a Fool's Heart, I note that musar, instruction, is used 4 times. It is used more than wisdom here. Now, there are wise dealings and words like that, but wisdom and musar, wisdom and instruction are connected. They're intimately connected. Wisdom and discipline. I like to call it discipline in wisdom. And this is a theme throughout the book of Proverbs. Again, Proverbs uses the word musar. 70% of the usages are found in the book of Proverbs. So let me read this to you. Proverbs chapter 1, verses 1 through 8. The proverb of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, musar, to understand words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealing, in righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the simple. That's the one without knowledge, right? The fool without knowledge. Knowledge and discretion to the youth. Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance. Now, I did not read through the end here, verses 6, 7, and 8, but I want you to note that the intention of wisdom in musar, or discipline in wisdom, is to give prudence to the simple. The child that is without knowledge, the fool, as we just looked at, the foolish simpleton that is without knowledge needs prudence. He will not make it if he doesn't have prudence. Keep that in mind as we go through this. Second of all, Proverbs chapter 14 and verse 8, the wisdom of the prudent is to discern his way, but the folly of fools is deceiving. Now, this is a fascinating verse, and there's different versions of this. It's what's called a doublet. It's used multiple times to emphasize its importance. But you notice here in Proverbs 14:8, the wisdom of the prudent is to discern his way. Let's stop there a second. So prudence, the first thing that we see here, number one, we don't have it. We saw that in Proverbs chapter 1. we need it. The simpleton, the natural man, the foolishness that is bound in everyone's heart keeps us from having prudence. So we desperately need this. But the second thing that we need here is to discern our way. Wisdom allows us to consider the way that we're going. It allows us to consider the end. It allows us to consider the distractions that are going to come up and be warned of those and understand the consequences if we engage with those. Discretion and discernment, good sense, are also words that are used right alongside prudence. Now, I don't personally see these as separate words. They're all combined, and when they're combined, prudence and discernment and discretion and good sense, it forms this idea that I just want to lay out for you, because this verse gives us this concept. If you think about the path, which is the way, you see this in Proverbs 14, verse 8. It's a theme throughout the book of Proverbs. The way, a way that we are to go, like a GPS that guides us. We must know where we're going and then commit to that path. So prudence and discretion and discernment and good sense give us the end. They give us the goal. They keep the goal in mind for us to shoot for, to keep our eye fixed on the prize that is set before us. It's similar to what Hebrews 12 does with the metaphor of the race. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. So prudence allows us to look to our end line, to the finish line. It allows us to stay focused. And that's a key word, focused. It allows us to concentrate on where we need to go. Second of all, prudence allows us, again, not to be distracted by understanding the consequences. Don't get off on the right or to the left. I mentioned Proverbs chapter 4 already. And then prudence also allows us to know the difference between right and wrong, truth and falsehood, light and darkness, on it could go. To be able to discern someone who is helping us or hindering us. The fool doesn't care. He wants to do what's convenient for him. And you see this in the second part of Proverbs 14, verse 8. The folly of fools is deceiving. He thinks that he knows best, and so why would he listen to anyone? He's just going to follow his heart. He's going to do what seems right unto him, because his way in his eyes, Proverbs 14 goes on to say, appears to be straight, but the end thereof is death. And then the last thing that prudence does, it orders our steps. God's word allows us to have a lamp that lights our path one step in front of the other. If you think about biblical times, they had a little candlestick that they would carry with them. They didn't have these massive lights that we have, the floodlights that we have today. And so their path was just lit appropriately so that they could take the next step and maybe a little bit beyond that. And so when the Word of God is compared to that lamp that lights our way, it's talking about prudence here. It allows us to order our steps, to plan to do righteousness. One of the words that's used both of the fool and of the wise in the book of Proverbs is the idea of scheming. The wise schemes to do well, to do good, and the fool schemes to do evil or to get others to do evil. So this idea of prudence is vital for us. And we're going to see these kind of four elements of prudence. And this is what a child that's labeled as ADHD needs. They need to be disciplined in wisdom so that they can have prudence, which is what every single child needs. I cannot reiterate this enough. I'm so heartbroken that we're stigmatizing children and categorizing them within a eugenic system that tells them that they're abnormal, that they're quote-unquote degenerates, that they're dysfunctioned, that something is broken within them. And many of these kids go through foster care. They've been through an experience that being traded hands multiple times, no fault of their own, and they do not see any value in and of themselves. And that is a shame. That is on us as a society. And then we doubly really traumatize them by putting these stigmatizing labels on them and saying you are abnormal and broken and just simply drugging them. And I hope you, whether you agree with me or not, just understand that I'm deeply concerned, and I have seen so many people come from out of this secular taxonomy and thrive. And I can give you example after example. This is not, again, just a theoretical thing. We're missing out on seeing a biblical phenomenology applied in our homes. And what our children need is to be disciplined in wisdom so that they can have understanding, which gives them prudence, and then becomes a permanent part of their life. Proverbs 8:12 is another verse. I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and I find knowledge and discretion. So you can see this intimate connection that Lady Wisdom is saying, hey, I'm the one who has prudence. You can't get this apart from me. And if we're trying to go to secularists and find words and theories and phrases to live by that is going to give us or our children prudence, we're not going to find it. It only comes through the wisdom of Christ found in his word. Now, I'm taking extra effort in this video, and I know that it's going longer than normal, but I think it's important that we look at several other passages concerning this idea of prudence because it is such an important aspect of helping children who have been, again, categorized. They have been set aside into this psychiatric taxonomy. So let's look at a couple more verses. Let's start with Proverbs 13, verse 16. Every prudent man acts with knowledge, but a fool flaunts his folly. And this is why a simpleton, one without knowledge, cannot be prudent. He must be taught knowledge, then understanding, then the prudence comes. This is really important for us to consider because a prudent person is saying, here is truth that I want to live by. When temptation comes, they have hidden God's word in their hearts so that they won't sin. They have said, okay, here is the truth. Here is what the deceitful desires of my flesh are telling me. I want to act according to knowledge. That's what prudence is. It is learning to make decisions based on truth, specifically God's truth, God's wisdom, God's knowledge, the knowledge of the Holy One, versus the natural man, as it says there in the second part of verse 16, but a fool flaunts his folly. It's just going to come out. He's going to do what his foolishness tells him to do. He's going to do what he feels like doing. Whatever he feels like doing, he's like the chaff which the wind drives away. He's just going to go, like Psalm chapter 1 tells us. The wise are not like that. The fool is like the chaff. The wise are like a tree planted by the rivers of water that brings forth fruit in his season, and whatever he does, there's behavior, he will prosper. Let's move on for time's sake to Proverbs 14, verse 15. The simple believes everything, but the prudent gives thought to his steps. This goes right in line with what we just discussed in Proverbs 13 and verse 16, that the simple fool believes everything. He's naive. He doesn't know better. I don't know if you, like me, grew up being fearful of vans and ice cream trucks, but my parents taught me over and over again not to talk to strangers if they drive up. And sadly, in that time and age, there were people driving around and kidnapping and abducting children. And sadly, that still happens, I realize. And now the internet has made that even more accessible. And that's a whole, again, another issue to discuss. But what I want you to understand is that the simpleton, the natural fool, will believe everything because he doesn't have knowledge. And notice the answer to that. But the prudent gives thought to his steps. He is planning his steps. He's acting according to knowledge, and he's saying, here's where I want to go. This is on us to teach our children to be successful. It's not going to happen naturally, and this is why discipline and wisdom is so essential. Let's look at Proverbs 12, verses 15 and 16. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. The vexation of a fool is known at once, but the prudent ignores an insult. So we looked at Proverbs 12:15, but we didn't attach it to verse 16. The vexation of a fool is known at once, but the prudent ignores an insult. The fool has no self-control. He's just going to vent what is there. Whatever is in his soul, the vexation of his soul, you're going to know about it. There's no filter, no self-control. This is the natural man. Remember, this is the way of a fool. It is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. The vexation of a fool is known at once, but the prudent ignores an insult. Why are they ignoring an insult? Because they don't want to be distracted. They know where they want to go, and they know that if they get distracted, they may never reach the goal. They have a lot to lose, and the person who's giving the insult doesn't. They are lacking prudence, and so they're insulting. And the wise says, you know what? This is not worth it to me. I have a goal in mind, and that's where I'm headed, and that's where I'm going to end up. Peter tells us something similar to this in 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 7. The end of all things is at hand, therefore be self-controlled and sober-minded for the sake of your prayers. So we are to be self-controlled and sober-minded. This is an imperative command. This is something we are called to do. If we're going to be godly people, we need to have prudence in our lives, which means self-control and sober-mindedness rather than just whatever we feel like doing. Now, I want to cite Derek Kidner, a well-known commentator on the book of Proverbs, highly regarded commentator at that. Notice what he talks about in regard to impulsivity and prudence. And this is on page 43 of his commentary on Proverbs. He gives 4 things here that are characteristic of the fool. And interestingly enough, they really describe what secularists are calling ADHD. Number 1, he will not start tasks on his own initiative. So he sees no real value in beginning tasks. Number 2, he will not finish those tasks or those things without supervision. Someone has to stand over him, just like the son is warned in Proverbs chapter 6 that without supervision, the ant does what they're supposed to do. They fulfill their responsibility, and the father calls his son to learn that same initiative, that same prudence. The third thing Kidner says is that he will not take responsibility for his failures. Nothing is ever his fault. He has an excuse for everything. And incidentally, if society gives him an excuse, he certainly is going to take that. And anyone who tells him differently, he will fight. He will get upset at. Again, if you rebuke a foolish man, no matter who it is, what stage of life, he will hate you. A scorner especially will do harm. And then fourth of all, he notes that, and I'm quoting here, consequently, he is restless with unsatisfied desire. That is interesting because unsatisfied desire and restlessness go hand in hand. The peace of God, the calm spirit, the soul that is at rest is resting in the Lord and yielding their desires, the destructive desires of the flesh, as Ephesians 2 tells us. And so these are 4 characteristics of the natural man. Again, this is not some abnormal thing. This is the normal state of all hearts that are born into this world. Discipline and wisdom that provides understanding, knowledge and understanding, and gives prudence is the solution. So I want to return back to the Frontiers in Psychiatry article that just came out this past week. Listen to what they say. Difficulty waiting is also a common problem for children with ADHD. The delay aversion hypothesis, again, I'm thankful they note that this is a hypothesis, suggests that symptoms of ADHD reflect alterations in the brain's dopaminergic reward system, whereby the value of delayed rewards is discounted to a greater extent than normal. Individuals with ADHD often face adverse consequences when confronted with delays. Over time, they develop a pervasive aversion to delays. Therefore, they typically opt for immediate or less delayed options over larger delayed ones, a phenomenon termed choice impulsivity. When delay is not possible to avoid, individuals with ADHD express maladaptive behaviors such as distraction, inattention, or overactivity, possibly for the purpose of decreasing the perception of waiting. Now that is interesting because, again, that's exactly what Proverbs says is the natural man, that they cannot see the end. They cannot see the future. And I'm going to look at this a bit more here in just a second. I don't want to get too far off into this. I'll probably do a whole video if people desire for me to do this. Leave a comment in the comment section if you would like me to do a video on psychostimulants or even psychotropic drugs in general. But there's been some fascinating studies done on these psychostimulants that are quote-unquote medicines for alleged ADHD. And that's a whole nother dynamic, the circular reasoning that they have created there. So what is fascinating, though, is that these psychostimulants are traditionally dopamine reuptake blockers, and they increase the flow of dopamine within the system. That's why they stimulate. That's why they keep a person from feeling drowsy, and they heighten the senses, they heighten the ability to pay attention. And this is true across the board. Do not buy into the lie that someone labeled and categorized that the drugs do something different to them. No, this is the mechanism of drug action doesn't care about labels. It does the exact same thing to people who consume them. Now, of course, our body chemistry and all that is different. And so it just like taking a Tylenol, it will affect different people differently. The same with caffeine, etc. I'm not discrediting that. But what I'm pointing out here is that what research is showing is that our dopaminergic system, what is often called the pleasure system, dopamine being the pleasure neurotransmitter, is when we achieve something, when we've worked hard to achieve something, when we achieve that, there's a dopamine hit. Dopamine is released and there's a sense of satisfaction. There's a sense of accomplishment. And you notice that these children don't like waiting. It's not fun to wait. Schoolwork is not fun. And what they found is that when children are taking these, again, whether they're labeled or not, the control groups experience the same thing. Whether they're taking these drugs or not, there is a sense that even the work is rewarding. So think about that. They're tricking people into thinking that even the work is rewarding, not just the strenuous activity to get to the end where you get rewarded. Many video games are geared towards the reward system. They have the dings, the ding, 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 as you're playing to give you feedback and increase the dopamine flow. It makes you want to come back, and it can even be addictive because it's stimulating and teaching the dopaminergic system to desire that and function in that way. And so, as I've shared with you, in many ways, playing video games with hours and hours upon end is teaching a child to pay attention in a specific way that when they get in the classroom, they're not getting. And so they're easily and understandably distracted. There's nothing wrong with them. Their brains have actually conformed to that, what is called neuroplasticity. So they've been taught to pay attention to a certain way versus the child that's been given a book day after day for hours, and that child has learned to pay attention and to concentrate in a completely different way. And so there is a lot here, and I wish I had time more to go into this. So in closing today, I just want to give a couple general ideas of impulsivity and prudence as we end. I mentioned in Proverbs chapter 6, verses 6 through 11, about the ant. And I just want to give two simple principles here that we need to look to the ant that without supervision gets his work done. Remember that someone labeled as ADHD will not even start tasks on his own initiative. He will not finish things without supervision. And we're going to take the time to look at the biblical concept of a slacker, a sluggard, or a sloth, as Proverbs uses, depending on what translation. I want to remind you that's not a unique category that some people fall into. All of us by nature begin. All types of fools can be sluggards or slackers, can be gluttons, can be adulterers, can be drunkards, etc. These are not a unique type of fool. This is a subcategory of foolishness, if I can say it that way. It's part of the biblical taxonomy. And so Proverbs chapter 6 and verses 6 through 11 addresses these very things. And of course, on page 70 of the DSM, page 69 of the DSM, they specifically talk about that a child who is under close supervision behaves as they are expected, as they're desired to behave, despite being labeled as ADHD. And that's an interesting point, considering Proverbs chapter 6 and the ant. So just two quick things to take away from Proverbs 6, verses 6 through 8. The ant without supervision gets his work done. And then in verses 9 through 11, that his laziness is counterproductive to success. So understanding that the harvest, the season is coming, and so he needs to take that account. He needs to consider, if he wants fruit in the harvest, that he must do what is appropriate now. He must take the steps and order his steps and act according to knowledge rather than just feeling like sitting around doing nothing, but desiring to be fruitful, desiring, if he's in sports, to be a champion. He's got to work hard to get there. And it is a principle of success that a child must be taught. It is vital. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's been long, but I hope you'll rewatch it. I hope you'll share it. I hope you'll consider for your own sake, but also for the children that you ever see, that there is a biblical phenomenology. And what I love about this, it is far superior than what secularists are offering. And get this, don't miss it, it gives us genuine hope for change, heart change that produces behavioral changes, not just trying to deal with behaviors and not deal with the character. If a child receives knowledge and understanding, then they will become prudent, and that prudence can become a permanent part of their character. I hope that you'll tune in for next week, and we'll continue this look at the construct of ADHD. God bless you.